This is a continuation of Chinese Magic by Algernon Blackwood, comprising parts 3 through 5, and the end. Part 3. To say that he was bored during the meal were an overstatement of Dr. Francis's mental condition, but to say that he was half bored seemed the literal truth. For one half of him, while he ate his steak and savory, and watched Fark manipulating Chu Chop Suey and Chuom Dong most cleverly with chopsticks, was too preoccupied with his own romance to allow the other half to give its full attention to the conversation. He had entered the room, however, with a distinct quickening of what may be termed his instinctive and infallible sense of diagnosis. That last remark of his friend's had stimulated him. He was aware of surprise, curiosity, and impatience. Willy-nilly, he began automatically to study him with a profounder interest. Something, he gathered, was not quite as it should be in Edward Fark's mental composition. There was what might be called an elusive emotional disturbance. He began to wonder and to watch. They talked, naturally, of China and of things Chinese, for the scholar responded to little else, and Francis listened with what sympathy and patience he could muster. Of art and beauty he had hitherto known little. His mind was practical and utilitarian. He now learned that all art was derived from China, where a high, fine, subtle culture had reigned since time immemorial. Older than Egypt was their wisdom. When the Western races were eating one another, before Greece was even heard of, the Chinese had reached a level of knowledge and achievement that few realized. Never had they, even in earliest times, been deluded by anthropomorphic conceptions of the deity, but perceived in everything the expressions of a single whole, whose giant activities they reverently worshipped. Their contempt for the Western scurry after knowledge, wealth, machinery, was justified, if Fark was worthy of belief. He seemed saturated with Chinese thought, art, philosophy, and his natural bias towards the celestial race had hardened into an attitude to life that had now become ineradicable. They deal, as it were, in essences, he declared. They discern the essence of everything, leaving out the superfluous, the unessential, the trivial. Their pictures alone prove it. Come with me, he concluded, and see the earthly paradise, now in the British Museum. It is like Botticelli, but better than anything Botticelli ever did. It was painted, he paused for emphasis, 600 years B.C. The wonder of this quiet, ancient civilization, a sense of its depth, its wisdom, grew upon his listener as the enthusiastic poet described its charm and influence upon himself. He willingly allowed the enchantment of the other's paradise to steal upon his own awakened heart. There was a good deal Francis might have offered by way of criticism and objection, but he preferred on the whole to keep his own views to himself and to let his friend wander unhindered through the mazes of his passionate evocation. All men, he well knew, needed a dream to carry them through life's disappointments, a dream that they could enter at will and find peace, contentment, happiness. Fark's dream was China. Why not? It was as good as another, and a man like Fark was entitled to what dream he pleased. "And their women?" he inquired at last, letting both halves of his mind speak together for the first time. But he was not prepared for the expression that leaped upon his friend's face at the simple question, nor for his method of reply. It was no reply, in point of fact. It was simply an attack upon all other types of woman, and upon the white, the English in particular, their emptiness, their triviality, their want of intuitive imagination, of spiritual grace, of everything, in a word, that should constitute woman a meet companion for man, and a little higher than the angels into the bargain. The doctor listened spellbound. Too humorous to be shocked, he was at any rate disturbed by what he heard, displeased a little too. It threatened too directly his own new tender dream. Only with the utmost self-restraint did he keep his temper under and prevent hot words he would have regretted later from tearing his friend's absurd claim into ragged shreds. He was wounded personally as well. Never now could he bring himself to tell his own secret to him. The outburst chilled and disappointed him, but it had another effect. It cooled his judgment. His sense of diagnosis quickened. He divined an idee-fix, a mania possibly. His interest deepened abruptly. He watched. He began to look about him with more wary eyes and a sense of uneasiness, once the anger passed, stirred in his friendly and affectionate heart. They had been sitting alone over their port for some considerable time, the servant having long since left the room. The doctor had sought to change the subject many times without much success, when suddenly Fark changed it for him. "Now," he announced, "I'll tell you something." And Francis guessed that the professional questions were on the way at last. "We must pity the living, remember, and part with the dead. Have you forgotten old Shan Yu?" The forgotten name came back to him, the picturesque East End dealer of many years ago. "The old merchant who taught you your first Chinese? I do recall him dimly, now you mention it. You made quite a friend of him, didn't you? He thought very highly of you. Ah, it comes back to me now. He offered something or other very wonderful in his gratitude, unless my memory fails me. His most valuable possession," Farky went on, a strange look deepening on his face, an expression of mysterious rapture, as it were, and one that Francis recognized and swiftly pigeonholed in his now attentive mind. "Which was?" he asked sympathetically. "You told me once, but so long ago that really it slipped my mind. Something magical, wasn't it?" He watched closely for his friend's reply. Fark lowered his voice to a whisper almost devotional. "The perfume of the Garden of Happiness," he murmured, with an expression in his eyes as though the mere recollection gave him joy. "Burn it," he told me, "in a brazier. Then inhale. You will enter the Valley of 1,000 Temples wherein lies the Garden of Happiness, and there you will meet your love. You will have 7 years of happiness with your love before the waters of separation flow between you. I give this to you who alone of men here have appreciated the wisdom of my land. Follow my body towards the sunrise. You, an Eastern soul in a barbarian body, will meet your destiny." The doctor's attention, such as the power of self-interest, quickened amazingly as he heard. His own romance flamed up with power. His friend, it dawned upon him suddenly, loved a woman. "Come," said Fark, rising quietly. "We will go into the other room, and I will show you what I have shown to but one other in the world before. You are a doctor," he continued, as he led the way to the silk-covered divan where golden dragons swallowed crimson suns and wonderful jade horses hovered near. "You understand the mind and nerves. States of consciousness you also can explain, and the effect of drugs is, doubtless, known to you." He swung to the heavy curtains that took the place of door, handed a lacquered box of cigarettes to his friend, and lit one himself. "Perfumes, too," he added. "You probably have studied, with their extraordinary evocative power." He stood in the middle of the room, the green light falling on his interesting and thoughtful face, and for a passing second Francis, watching keenly, observed a change flit over it and vanish. The eyes grew narrow and slid tilted upwards. The skin wore a shade of yellow underneath the green from the lamp of jade. The nose slipped back a little, the cheekbones forward. "Perfumes," said the doctor. "No. Of perfumes I know nothing, beyond their interesting effect upon the memory. I cannot help you there. But you, I suspect," and he looked up with an inviting sympathy that concealed the close observation underneath. "You yourself, I feel sure, can tell me something of value about them?" "Perhaps," was the calm reply. "Perhaps, for I have smelt the perfume of the Garden of Happiness, and I have been in the Valley of 1,000 Temples." He spoke with a glow of joy and reverence, almost devotional. The doctor waited in some suspense, while his friend moved towards an inlaid cabinet across the room. More than broad-minded, he was that much rarer thing, an open-minded man, ready at a moment's notice to discard all preconceived ideas, provided new knowledge that necessitated the Holocaust were shown to him. At present, nonetheless, he held very definite views of his own. "Please ask me any questions you like," he added. "All I know is entirely yours, as always." He was aware of suppressed excitement in his friend that betrayed itself in every word and look and gesture, an excitement intense, and not as yet explained by anything he had seen or heard. The scholar, meanwhile, had opened a drawer in the cabinet and taken from it a neat little packet tied up with purple silk. He held it with tender, almost loving care as he came and sat down on the divan beside his friend. "This," he said, in a tone, again, of something between reverence and worship, "contains what I have to show you first." He slowly unrolled it, disclosing a yet smaller silken bag within, colored a deep, rich orange. There were 2 vertical columns of writing on it, painted in Chinese characters. The doctor leaned forward to examine them. His friend translated, "The perfume of the garden of happiness," he read aloud, tracing the letters of the first column with his finger. "The destroyer of honorable homes," he finished, passing to the second, and then proceeded to unwrap the little silken bag. Before it was actually open, however, and the pale, shredded material resembling colored chaff visible to the eyes, the doctor's nostrils had recognized the strange aroma he had first noticed about his friend's letter received earlier in the day. The same soft, penetrating odor, sharply piercing, sweet and delicate, rose to his brain. It stirred at once a deep emotional pleasure in him. Having come to him first when he was aglow with his own unexpected romance, his mind and heart full of the woman he had just left, that delicious, torturing state revived in him quite naturally. The evocative power of perfume with regard to memory is compelling. A livelier sympathy towards his friend and towards what he was about to hear awoke in him spontaneously. He did not mention the letter, however. He merely leaned over to smell the fragrant perfume more easily. Fark drew back the open packet instantly, at the same time holding out a warning hand. "Careful," he said gravely. "Be careful, my old friend, unless you desire to share the rapture and the risk that have been mine. To enjoy its full effect, true, this dust must be burned in a brazier and its smoke inhaled, but even sniffed, as you now would sniff it, and you are in danger." "Of what?" asked Francis, impressed by the other's extraordinary intensity of voice and manner. "Of heaven, but possibly of heaven before your time." Part 4. The tale that Fark unfolded then had certainly a strange celestial flavor, a glory not of this dull world, and as his friend listened, his interest deepened with every minute, while his bewilderment increased. He watched closely, expert that he was, for clues that might guide his deductions aright, but for all his keen observation and experience, he could detect no inconsistency, no weakness, nothing that betrayed the smallest mental aberration. The origin and nature of what he already decided was an idée fixe, a mania, evaded him entirely. This evasion piqued and vexed him. He had heard 1,000 tales of similar type before. That this one in particular should baffle his unusual skill touched his pride. Yet he faced the position honestly. He confessed himself baffled until the end of the evening. When he went away, however, he went away satisfied, even forgetful, because a new problem of yet more poignant interest had replaced the first. "It was after 3 years out there," said Fark, "that a sense of my loneliness first came upon me. It came upon me bitterly. My work had not then been recognized. Obstacles and difficulties had increased. I felt a failure. I had accomplished nothing. And it seemed to me I had misjudged my capacities, taken a wrong direction, and wasted my life accordingly. For my move to China, remember, was a radical move, and my boats were burnt behind me. This sense of loneliness was really devastating." Francis, already fidgeting, put up his hand. "One question, if I may," he said, "and I'll not interrupt again." "By all means," said the other patiently. "What is it?" "Were you—" "We are such old friends," he apologized. "Were you still celibate as ever?" Fark looked surprised, then smiled. "My habits had not changed," he replied. "I was, as always, celibate." "Ah," murmured the doctor and settled down to listen. "And I think now," his friend went on, "that it was the lack of companionship that first turned my thoughts towards conscious disappointment. However that may be, it was one evening, as I walked homewards to my little house, that I caught my imagination lingering upon English memories, though chiefly, I admit, upon my old Chinese tutor, the dead Shan Yu. It was dusk, the stars were coming out in the pale evening air, and the orchards, as I passed them, stood like wavering ghosts of unbelievable beauty. The effect of thousands upon thousands of these trees, flooding the twilight of a spring evening with their sea of blossom, is almost unearthly. They seem transparencies. Their color hangs sheets upon the very sky. I crossed a small wooden bridge that joined 2 of these orchards above a stream, and in the dark water I watched a moment the mingled reflection of stars and flowering branches on the quiet surface. It seemed too exquisite to belong to earth, this fairy garden of stars and blossoms, shining faintly in the crystal depths, and my thought, as I gazed, dived suddenly down the little avenue that memory opened into former days. I remembered Shan Yu's present, given to me when he died. His very words came back to me. The garden of happiness in the Valley of the Thousand Temples, with its promise of love, of 7 years of happiness, and the prophecy that I should follow his body towards the sunrise and meet my destiny. This memory I took home with me, into my lonely little one-story house upon the hill. My servants did not sleep there. There was no one near. I sat by the open window with my thoughts, and you may easily guess that before very long I had unearthed the long-forgotten packet from among my things, spread a portion of its contents on a metal tray above a lighted brazier, and was comfortably seated before it, inhaling the light blue smoke with its exquisite and fragrant perfume. A light air entered through the window, the distant orchards below me trembled, rose and floated through the dusk, and I found myself, almost at once, in a pavilion of flowers. A blue river lay shining in the sun before me, as it wandered through a lovely valley where I saw groves of flowering trees among 1,000 scattered temples. Drenched in light and color, the valley lay dreaming amid a peaceful loveliness that woke what seemed impossible, unrealizable, longings in my heart. I yearned towards its groves and temples. I would bathe my soul in that flood of tender light, and my body in the blue coolness of that winding river. In 1,000 temples must I worship. Yet these impossible yearnings instantly were satisfied. I found myself there at once, and the time that passed over my head you may reckon in centuries, if not in ages. I was in the garden of happiness, and its marvelous perfume banished time and sorrow. There was no end to chill the soul, nor any beginning, which is its foolish counterpart. Nor was there loneliness. The speaker clasped his thin hands and closed his eyes a moment in what was evidently an ecstasy of the sweetest memory man may ever know. A slight trembling ran through his frame, communicating itself to his friend upon the divan beside him. This understanding, listening, sympathetic friend, whose eyes had never once yet withdrawn their attentive gaze from the narrator's face. I was not alone, the scholar resumed, opening his eyes again and smiling out of some deep inner joy. Shan Yu came down the steps of the first temple and took my hand, while the great golden figures in the dim interior turned their splendid shining heads to watch. Then, breathing the soul of his ancient wisdom in my ear, he led me through all the perfumed ways of that enchanted garden, worshipping with me at 100 deathless shrines, led me, I tell you, to the sound of soft gongs and gentle bells, by fragrant groves and sparkling streams, mid 1,000,000 gorgeous flowers, until, beneath that unsetting sun, we reached the heart of the valley, where the source of the river gushed forth beneath the lighted mountains. He stopped and pointed across the narrow waters. I saw the woman. The woman, his listener murmured beneath his breath, though Fark seemed unaware of interruption. She smiled at me and held her hands out, and while she did so, even before I could express my joy and wonder in response, Shan Yu, I saw, had crossed the narrow stream and stood beside her. I made to follow then, my heart burning with inexpressible delight. But Shan Yu held up his hand as they began to move down the flowered bank together, making a sign that I should keep pace with them, though on my own side. Thus, side by side, yet with the blue, sparkling stream between us, we followed back along its winding course, through the heart of that enchanted valley, my hands stretched out towards the radiant figure of my love, and hers stretched out towards me. They did not touch, but our eyes, our smiles, our thoughts, these met and mingled in a sweet union of unimagined bliss, so that the absence of physical contact was unnoticed and laid no injury on our marvelous joy. It was a spirit union, and our kiss a spirit kiss. Therein lay the subtlety and glory of the Chinese wonder, for it was our essences that met, and for such union there is no satiety, and equally no possible end. The perfume of the garden of happiness is an essence. We were in eternity. The stream meanwhile widened between us, and as it widened, my love grew farther from me in space, smaller, less visibly defined, yet ever essentially more perfect, and never once with a sense of distance that made our union less divinely close. Across the widening reaches of blue, sunlit water, I still knew her smile, her eyes, the gestures of her radiant being. I saw her exquisite reflection in the stream, and mid the music of those soft gongs and gentle bells, the voice of Shan Yu came like a melody to my ears. You have followed me into the sunrise, and have found your destiny. Behold now your love. In this valley of 1,000 temples, you have known the garden of happiness, and its perfume your soul now inhales. I am bathed, I answered, in a happiness divine. It is forever. The waters of separation, his answer floated like a bell, lie widening between you. I moved nearer to the bank, impelled by the pain in his words, to take my love and hold her to my breast. But I would cross to her, I cried, and saw that, as I moved, Shan Yu and my love came likewise closer to the water's edge across the widening river. They both obeyed, I was aware, my slightest wish. 7 years of happiness you may know, sang his gentle tones across the brimming flood, if you would cross to her. Yet the destroyer of honorable homes lies in the shadows that you must cast outside. I heard his words. I noticed for the first time that in the blaze of this radiant sunshine we cast no shadows on the sea of flowers at our feet. And I stretched out my arms towards my love across the river. I accept my destiny, I cried. I will have my 7 years of bliss. And stepped forward into the running flood. As the cool water took my feet, my love's hands stretched out both to hold me and to bid me stay. There was acceptance in her gesture, but there was warning too. I did not falter. I advanced until the water bathed my knees, and my love too came to meet me, the stream already to her waist, while our arms stretched forth above the running flood towards each other. The change came suddenly. Shan Yu first faded behind her advancing figure into air. There stole a chill upon the sunlight. A cool mist rose from the water, hiding the garden and the hills beyond. Our fingers touched. I gazed into her eyes. Our lips lay level with the water, and the room was dark and cold about me. The brazier stood extinguished at my side. The dust had burnt out, and no smoke rose. I slowly left my chair and closed the window, for the air was chill. Part 5. It was difficult at first to return to Hampstead and the details of ordinary life about him. Francis looked round him slowly, freeing himself gradually from the spell his friend's words had laid even upon his analytical temperament. The transition was helped, however, by the details that everywhere met his eye. The Chinese atmosphere remained. More, its effect had gained, if anything. The embroideries of yellow gold, the pictures, the lacquered stools and inlaid cabinets. Above all, the exquisite figures in green jade upon the shelf beside him. All this, in the shimmering pale olive light the lamps shed everywhere, helped his puzzled mind to bridge the gulf from the garden of happiness into the decorated villa upon Hampstead Heath. There was silence between the two men for several minutes. Far was it from the doctor's desire to injure his old friend's delightful fantasy. For he called it fantasy, although something in him trembled. He remained, therefore, silent. Truth to tell, perhaps, he knew not exactly what to say. Fark broke the silence himself. He had not moved since the story ended. He sat motionless, his hands tightly clasped, his eyes alight with the memory of his strange imagined joy, his face rapt and almost luminous, as though he still wandered through the groves of the enchanted garden and inhaled the perfume of its perfect happiness in the valley of the 1,000 temples. It was 2 days later, he went on suddenly in his quiet voice, only 2 days afterwards, that I met her. You met her? You met the woman of your dream? Francis's eyes opened very wide. In that little harbor town, repeated Fark calmly. I met her in the flesh. She had just landed in a steamer from up the coast. The details are of no particular interest. She knew me, of course, at once, and naturally I knew her. The doctor's tongue refused to act as he heard. It dawned upon him suddenly that his friend was married. He remembered the woman's touch about the house. He recalled, too, for the first time that the letter of invitation to dinner had said, "Come to us." he was full of a bewildered astonishment. The reaction upon himself was odd, perhaps, yet wholly natural. His heart warmed towards his imaginative friend. He could now tell him his own new strange romance. The woman who haunted him crept back into the room and sat between them. He found his tongue. "You married her, Edward?" he exclaimed. "She is my wife," was the reply, in a gentle, happy voice. "Ach!" He could not bring himself to say the word. "A foreigner?" "My wife is a Chinese woman." Fark helped him easily with a delighted smile. So great was the other's absorption in the actual moment that he had not heard the step in the passage that his host had heard. The latter stood up suddenly. "I hear her now," he said. "I'm glad she's come back before you left." He stepped towards the door. But before he reached it, the door was opened, and in came the woman herself. Francis tried to rise, but something had happened to him. His heart missed a beat. Something, it seemed, broke in him. He faced a tall, graceful young Englishwoman with black eyes of sparkling happiness, the woman of his own romance. She still wore the feather boa round her neck. She was no more Chinese than he was. "My wife," he heard Fark introducing them as he struggled to his feet, searching feverishly for words of congratulation, normal, everyday words he ought to use. "I'm so pleased, oh, so pleased," Fark was saying. He heard the sound from a distance. His sight was blurred as well. "My two best friends in the world, my English comrade and my Chinese wife." His voice was absolutely sincere with conviction and belief. "But we have already met," came the woman's delightful voice, her eyes full upon his face with smiling pleasure. "I saw you at Mrs. Mallison's tea only this afternoon." And Francis remembered suddenly that the Mallisons were old acquaintances of Farkas as well as of himself. "And I even dared to ask who you were," the voice went on, floating from some other space, it seemed, to his ears. "I had you pointed out to me. I had heard of you from Edward, of course, but you vanished before I could be introduced." The doctor mumbled something or other polite and, he hoped, adequate. But the truth had flashed upon him with remorseless suddenness. She had heard of him, the famous mental specialist. Her interest in him was cruelly explained, cruelly both for himself and for his friend. Fark's delusion lay clear before his eyes. An awakening to reality might involve dislocation of the mind. She too, moreover, knew the truth. She was involved as well, and her interest in himself was consultation. "7 years we've been married, just 7 years today," Fark was saying thoughtfully as he looked at them. "Curious, rather, isn't it?" "Very," said Francis, turning his regard from the black eyes to the gray. Thus it was that Owen Francis left the house a little later with a mind in a measure satisfied, yet in a measure forgetful too. Forgetful of his own deep problem, because another of even greater interest had replaced it. "Why undeceive him?" ran his thought. "He need never know. It's harmless anyhow, I can tell her that." But side by side with this reflection ran another that was oddly haunting, considering his type of mind. "Destroyer of honorable homes" was the form of words it took, and with a sigh he added, "Chinese magic." The end. Best audiobooks for free hopes that you have enjoyed this production of Chinese Magic by Algernon Blackwood. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble, as your subscription is the support we need to create more great free content. Please look to our website at bestaudiobooksforfree.com for a complete list of our audiobooks.